Hello, welcome to Life Under Lockdown. It's back across to the Emerald Isle today and the great city of Dublin to chat with the editor of the Irish Catholic newspaper, Michael Kelly. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, John. Thanks.
Yeah, so obviously this week we are passing a significant milestone. It's 1 year since Ireland very tragically voted to, bring in abortion laws in the Republic. How has, do you think, the last year changed Irish society, given that abortion is now available there?
Well, I would say that it has changed things very dramatically. I'd say for pro-life people, it was a massive wake-up call. The fact that 2/3 of our fellow citizens would vote to remove the constitutional protection for the right to life of the unborn from our constitution, from the foundational document of the Republic, really was quite shocking for people. I think in the campaign, perhaps we thought we weren't going to win the campaign, but I don't think anyone could have imagined the margin. So the ground shifted significantly. I mean, Ireland traditionally was known for the pro-life ethos. I mean, one of the last countries in the Western world to maintain that. And until relatively recently, a majority of people supported that, but that's no longer the case. So I think the stark reality for us now is that, when we pass our maternity hospitals, for example, where my office is right around the country from a maternity hospital, you realize now that in one part of that hospital, doctors are fighting to save the life of a premature baby, while in another part of that very same hospital, doctors are taking the life of another child. So it's a very stark reality, and it came as a huge shock to the pro-life community, the various pro-life organizations. But I think what it did is it made them realize, look, we have to go back to basics here. And perhaps our complacency here was much like the faith, much like the church. We relied on the wider culture for too long, and we didn't notice that the wider culture was shifting from under us. So it has made us realize that we have to be countercultural. It's very sad, but I think many pro-life people are not disheartened because they know that what they fight for, they know that what they say, what they propose is actually correct, is right, and that it will win through, because we are seeing this in other parts of the world, and we're seeing that the small victories that are happening in other parts of the world are happening precisely because pro-life people are not keeping quiet, precisely because they're not rolling away. And one of the points that I was making in the aftermath of the referendum, because it was quite common for those who won to be, let's say, less than gracious in victory. And the common thread was that pro-life people, well, you've lost, so it's time to exit the stage. It's time for you to leave. But one of the things that I've always pointed out is the removal of Article 8 from the Constitution, that's the right to life of the unborn, was carried by almost exactly the same margin who voted in 1983 to put the article into the Constitution in the first place. So the pro-choice people didn't crawl away then. So we pro-life people are not crawling away now. And one of the things, again, people say, it's a minority view, and certainly the referendum confirmed that is a minority view. But I also like to tell people that in the 17th century in Tuscany, a small group of people got together and they said, you know what, actually we think the death penalty is a terrible thing and we think we should work to end the death penalty. And now that is a given throughout the world. So I don't mind being part of a small minority who everyone says is out of touch, because it's small minorities ultimately that lead to massive change.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that really hurt us is we're part of the Irish diaspora in Scotland, and we owe so much to our Catholic faith from the Irish, was seeing those scenes of jubilation, you could call them, people celebrating and, celebrating the fact that babies would soon be killed. It really made a lot of us very, very sick to our stomach. We couldn't quite believe that we couldn't quite believe the scenes that we saw outside Dublin Castle. But again, you are probably in a better position as a country than us, because if we ran the same poll in the same situation, I imagine that the numbers would be much, much more starker in Scotland than it would be in Ireland. So I don't know what your thoughts would be in that. Maybe so.
I mean, certainly in countries where abortion becomes firmly established, it increasingly becomes part of a way of life, unfortunately. The numbers inevitably creep up. And it's also true to say that people who traditionally would be pro-life often drift away, and they often move into a situation where they say, well, look, abortion is just one of those things. The signs of jubilation were quite disturbing, actually, really, because I can accept, even though I profoundly disagree, but I can accept that someone in good faith may believe that abortion is sometimes necessary. I disagree completely with them, but I could understand how they could reach that conclusion. But the jubilation at the jubilation at abortion is something quite particular, because this was not a political campaign like any other. So this is not, or your football team winning or your football team losing or anything like this. This was a dramatic shift in Irish culture, and it was a dramatic shift away. You speak there about being part of the Irish diaspora in Scotland, and that's something that we're very proud of. Very proud that when St. Patrick came to this island in 432, that he transformed this island within a generation from what was quite a barbaric and an unkind place to a very Christian place, and a place of great compassion and mercy, and spread out there from all over the world to Scotland, to England, to continental Europe, all across the known world in the 19th century, and brought those values with us. And perhaps somehow we thought here in Ireland that we would maybe be shielded from some of the forces that have affected the rest of the world. But it's interesting when you look back. We were commemorating last year the 40th anniversary of the visit of St. John Paul II to Ireland in 1979. And if you read back the speech in particular that he gave at Limerick just before he was leaving Ireland, it was a massive warning. He warned about abortion. He warned about euthanasia. He warned about all kinds of attacks on human dignity. He said, these questions will come to Ireland. And he was prophetic, in a sad way. But, John Paul II knew the way the world was going. He knew the way secularization was going. And he knew that even then Ireland would be affected by that secularization. One of the things that is profoundly disturbing in a lot of the media coverage post-referendum is there's a very strong thrust in the media that this debate is over and done with. For example, this week we have a new documentary film coming out which is charting the campaign. The name of the film is When Women Won. So this is to imply that no woman voted against the referendum, that no woman is pro-life, which is profoundly untrue. I mean, the main volunteers, anytime I would have gone to a pro-life meeting, to a campaign meeting, I would say 80% of the people there were women. And actually, which gave me great hope, is many of them young women who are out of step with many other women of their generation. But you have that relentless bias that's there, that in the abortion referendum, there are good guys and bad guys. And the good guys are those who pioneered this campaign to legalize abortion in Ireland, and the bad guys are those people who would like to drag us back to the 1950s. So that narrative is very much there in the media. But I say, pro-life people here are audacious, they're bold, they're not keeping quiet, they're not saying that this thing is over, and they're not walking away quietly. And one of the heartening things was in our general election in February, the 18 members of the Oireachtas, the 18 members of the Dáil who voted against the abortion legislation, every single one of them was re-elected. And some of the prominent pro-choice people were not re-elected. Now, I'm not saying that the reason why they weren't re-elected was because their stance on abortion, but it was very, very heartening that despite a huge campaign to unseat the 18 pro-life TDs, all of them retained their seats. So that's very heartening, and that's going to be a significant minority that will be there in the Parliament agitating and standing up year after year when the legislation is reviewed and opposing it. And that will give great heart to people as well.
Yeah, what really strikes me about Irish politics is there's a distinct difference between, obviously, in the island of Ireland, we've had a very, very strong pro-life group in the north of Ireland and in the 6 counties, I would say. What do you think the reaction's been with the imposition of abortion in Northern Ireland from Westminster there on the ground in Northern Ireland?
Well, it is a huge damaging effect on the Good Friday Agreement. The first time I was born and grew up in the North, and the first time I was ever eligible to vote, it was to vote for the Good Friday Agreement. And I voted yes for the agreement, obviously, like most people. And the reason why I supported the agreement emphatically, despite being an Irish nationalist, despite wanting the eventual reunification of the island of Ireland as one single republic, and the reason why I voted for the Good Friday Agreement was because it said, it put in stone, whatever happens, the constitutional position of the North of Ireland in the future will be the decision of the people of the North of Ireland and their decision alone. That we would guarantee our own future, that whatever the future of the North would be, it would be in the hands of the people. The idea was that no single identity would be exaggerated at the expense of another identity. So the British identity of the North of Ireland would not be exaggerated at the expense of the Irish identity, and vice versa. And locally elected people would make our decisions, people who would be accountable to us, people who would be elected to us every 4 years. And then when it came to the issue of abortion, MPs in England and Scotland and Wales decided, while having supported the peace process, that they now knew more than the people of the North of Ireland, and abortion was imposed. And that is absolutely no exaggeration. All of the Northern Irish MPs in Westminster who take their seats, every single one of them opposed this legislation. This was a legislative move by a small rump of MPs from England, Scotland, Wales to impose abortion on Northern Ireland over the heads of the people, over the heads of the locally elected representatives. So there's a lot of anger about that. And if I could compare that to the situation in the Republic, we lost a referendum in the Republic. That's the way democracy goes. It's a sad day, but you know what? When you don't manage to convince enough people to your side, that's what happens. In Northern Ireland, there was no chance of a vote. There was no chance of local politicians being consulted. There was no chance of local people to be able to lobby their representatives who are accountable to them. This was imposed from on high in a very, very draconian way. And I can say it is a sad reality of the fact that many people who are pro-choice in their outlook, many people who are pro-abortion in their outlook, become absolute zealots about it. They cannot rest until abortion is available in every part of the world. And they saw an opportunity to impose that on Northern Ireland. And it has been very damaging for democracy. And democracy, has been under threat in the North. And this has done it immense damage. And I have to say, the next time I hear some of these MPs from England, Scotland and Wales, offering advice about cross-community activities in the North or anything like that, I thank them to mind their own business, because actually they really don't care about the people of Northern Ireland. They really sought just to impose this regime without any consultation whatsoever.
Absolutely. I think one of the most worrying aspects of this pandemic that we're facing just now, I don't know if it's the case in the North, but certainly in the United Kingdom, I don't know if it applies to Northern Ireland, but Matt Hancock has, basically through the back door allowed abortive pills to be, prescribed by telephone, which is extremely worrying. I don't know if you saw one of the news stories today. It's not been confirmed yet, but that a woman actually managed to have those pills for a 28-week-old fetus. So again, if that is confirmed, that's further evidence that this is clearly a very, very dangerous and radical move by the government, which is unregulating abortion. And as you mentioned previously, people are talking about taking Ireland and the United Kingdom back to the 1950s. Then surely this is exactly the same thing, where you're taking abortion back to this unregulated state.
And actually, it really reveals the lie that this is about women's health, because it is deeply, deeply irresponsible. You can't get strong painkillers prescribed over the telephone from a doctor. You will need a consultation from your doctor before you can get any opioid or anything, morphine, anything like that. And yet, medication that will kill the unborn child can be prescribed. It's deeply dangerous, and I hope to God not, but one would have to imagine in such an unregulated environment that it's only a matter of time before there is a serious risk to some woman's health who is in desperate need and feels that this is her only option, and that the legislation, the only legislation that can be offered her is just to get these pills in the post. So it's deeply distressing. And the energy and the input overall that goes into the abortion industry, if a fraction of that went into helping women who are having difficulties in pregnancy, because, you know, I have spoken, and I'm sure you've met yourself. I've spoken to many women who considered abortion, and years later, you know, they will tell you they only needed a small bit of help, whether it was somewhere to stay for a few months, whether it was, you know, a little bit of money, whether it was just somebody to put their hand on their shoulder and say, you know what, you can actually do this. And we as a society, we put so little energy and enthusiasm into things like that.
Yeah, well, listen, thanks for your briefest of insights into the last year in Ireland. It is very worrying for us all. Certainly, we are going to be encouraging our followers to, first of all, use the spiritual power of prayer to try and reverse this horrendous trend in Ireland. But also, if you are Irish and you're watching and you're in the North or in the Republic, then do all you can politically as well to vote the right way, to be that witness to life. Unfortunately, I'm glad to meet you for the first time. Unfortunately, it's more it's a rather depressing situation, but I'm sure I'll be back over in Ireland at some point. You're a Tyrone man, I believe.
I certainly am, exactly. So I try to get up as much as normal, but as much as possible. But during this pandemic, it's just not possible. We're not allowed to travel any more than 5 kilometres from our home. So I'm missing the green hills of Tyrone. Dublin has its charms, but it's not Tyrone.
Well, so am I, because my ancestral zone, if you can call it, is the Sperrins, basically. So
fantastic.
Plumbridge and Gorchin is basically where all my ancestors come from. My grandfather was
about 8 miles from where I was born, so it's very close.
Probably distant related in some way.
No question.
Yeah, but you stay safe, Michael, and hopefully that this pandemic will be much more, you know, better condition in the next few months to come.
Thank you, John. God bless you and all of your viewers, and keep up the good work. It's a real inspiration every time I open up Facebook to see a fresh video. So keep it up, and God bless.
Thanks so much, Michael. God bless you as well in your work.